Hey everybody, this is Kennedy Hawk from the MCM team. We are doing our weekly tier list for this week, talking about usable uses cards. So let's dive right in and talk about what that means. So what are uses? This is a common rules question, so I thought I'd address it right away. But uses is a ability that's printed on a lot of cards, including cards in the core set like the ones shown here. The RRG reads, when a card with this keyword enters play, place X all-purpose counters from the token pool on the card. The word following the value establishes and identifies the type of uses that card can hold. Each card with this keyword also has an ability that references the type of use established by the keyword as a part of the cost. After the last all-purpose counter is removed from a card with uses and the effect resolves, discard that card. So let's look at these three from the core set really quick. We've got Surveillance Team and Justice, which is a 2-cost support. For uses, it has 3 snoop counters placed onto it, and it says, action, exhaust surveillance team and remove 1 snoop counter from it to remove 1 threat from a scheme. So basically, you're going to get 3 threat removal slow dripped over 3 turns because you have to exhaust surveillance team to do so. And surveillance team has some upcoming support in the upcoming Sinister Modus expansion, so look for it to skyrocket on this tier list the next time I do it. Right now, I'm evaluating what I have in the card box sitting at the desk next to me. Med Team, similar thing, but it has a 3 cost and uses with 3 medical counters. Exhaust Med Team and remove 1 medical counter from it. Heal 2 damage from a friendly character. That could be an ally or a hero. Really good. And Tac Team, 3 uses, 3 attack counters. Exhaust Tac Team and remove 1 attack counter from it. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. So these are examples of uses. A lot of times there's slow drip things that happen slowly over time, but it's a way for the designers to allow you to play a card to your field that sticks for a little while, but not for the entirety of the game unless you decide to delay the uses of it. A lot of times they're a little bit more efficient for their costs, or ideally they would be, because things come out slowly or over time. They're almost like an ally, like these surveillance team and tac team. They feel a lot like an ally, but without the ability to chump block, but also without the ability to get hit by AoE damage and things like that. So they're a little bit unique and a little bit interesting, and we'll be talking about all the cards that have uses. So I said this was a common rules question. There's a lot of weapons in Rocket's kit that place charge counters on them when they come into play, but they don't have the uses keyword, so they will not discard themselves when you run out of counters on them. Instead, you'll have to flip to Alter Ego as Rocket and use an action to discard them and turn them into extra cash. But in this case, these cards will self-discard. You just have to remember when you see uses, eventually it's going to be used up. All right, so what are we going to judge these cards on? We're going to talk about, is this card efficient? Is it on the cost curve for that aspect that it is in? Does this card offer anything unique, or does it have an equivalent within aspect or within kit or wherever it came from? And does the aspect or character fit this card well? Does this sort of jam well within the aspect and offer something new, or is it kind of odd where it's placed? All right, not even sure what I was getting at with that last one, but I have a bunch of pluses and minuses written in my notebook, so I better figure something out. And here we have our tier maker tier list. So we have 5 tiers, as always. We have the super usable tier, where we're only going to put 1 card. Last time I put a bunch of things in the S tier, and some people DM'd me and said, hey, I hate how you put a bunch of things in S tier. You used to only put 1 thing in God tier, and you're right. There's only 1 God of uses today, and we'll find out who that's going to be soon. There's the A pretty good use tier. It's a pretty useful card. There's the B tier, which is kind of just meh. And then there's the can't use this super well tier. And then there's the don't use these cards tier. So we'll see where these useful uses cards end up. And we're going to start out right away with a few cards that we're just going to throw into the don't use these card pool. I put these in here because I wanted to show that uses is something that gets used on player cards as well as villain cards. So Crossbones Machine Gun and Fanaticism from Galaxy's Most Wanted. 1 card you probably don't mind seeing, 1 card that just makes you cringe when you see the face of Ronan in the card art. Those cards have uses as well, so uses can exist on player cards and on encounter cards, but obviously you couldn't use these in your deck. If you could, they would probably make you really strong if they were self-referential. But there's a set of 4 new uses cards that I want to start out by talking about. They are Vigilante Training, Defensive Training, Leadership Training, and there's one that's missing. Where did it go? Hold the phone. Did I not put one in here? And we're back. That's pretty embarrassing. We hadn't put Assault Training in there. Not to be confused with combat training, which is not a uses card, which is also in aggression. So, there's that. All right, there's 4 new cards in this last wave of Marvel Champions hero packs, and each of them is a max 2 per deck card. They provide 2 uses counters on them, and each of them have the alter ego action to exhaust this card and remove a uses counter, to shuffle a card, shuffle an event card from that aspect back into your deck. Now these cards are really interesting because recursion is really strong. We've seen with Always Be Running, since that's key to Quicksilver's kit, when you can shuffle that back in with Serval Industries, it can end a game. We've seen with Wasp, being able to shuffle in any mental card can be really strong. But are these cards as good? And that is a good question. And maybe this is where I was going with that third thing, looking at my check marks right now. All right, so we're going to talk about each of these cards. Are they efficient? I think that they're not very efficient, honestly. You're paying 2 resources to put cards back into your deck. Now, you can build around them, and you can make really awesome plays and abilities and combos by using them. But are they efficient? You're not gaining any card advantage from this. You're just simply putting cards back into your deck. So you're seeing your most efficient piece more frequently, so maybe that makes them efficient, but you're basically taxing each of those pieces by 1 resource cost. So I would say that they're not super efficient, but they can be efficient, right? If you're shuffling Maria Hill, well, she's not an event, so probably not. But make the calls back into your deck so you can play Maria Hill more. That can be really efficient for your team. At the same time, you probably run 3 make the calls and 3 rapid responses, so maybe this isn't as good as that because you're still paying the resource cost. But ultimately, I'm going to give them like a meh line for, is this card efficient? Does this card offer anything unique? I think all of these cards offer something unique. The only one that I would say is a downfall a little bit is Leadership. And that's because Leadership already has a ton of recursion. Now, they don't have event recursion. So this can allow you, so maybe I'll put this back up here, to put a bunch of get readies and things like that in your deck. But you'll see, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, there's already a way you can do that with uses supports that don't involve you flipping down to alter ego form. And now this is where I'm going with this, is I'm going to put 3 of these into a pretty good use tier. And actually what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to drop Assault Training down to can't use this well. I'm going to put Justice up into a pretty good use and leave the other 2 in B tier. Because since you have to flip to alter ego to use these cards, there's a hidden cost in these cards that is the villain's probably going to scheme. Now Justice has access to lots of confusion, so they can avoid that cost and soak one of their confuses if they want to apply another one, as well as they're really good at removing threats, so you can mitigate whatever the villain might do. Leadership is almost there with that, but when you flip down with Leadership, you're not using your allies to chump block, which is the most efficient use of your allies. So you can leave them out there for other players and save them for future turns, but ultimately you're wasting some sort of resource or mitigation that Leadership had to offer. Now, Protection, you'd think it would be down here, because Protection and Aggression are both horrible at removing threat. Flipping down at the wrong time just to trigger your defensive training could literally ruin your game. What Protection has going for it is they have a lot of reaction cards that happen in the villain phase, and you can play this in hero form and sit on it until exactly the right moment. But if you flip down when there's about 12 cards left in your deck, you can shuffle a really important reaction card like Counterpunch back into your deck. And then at the start of your next turn, you could shuffle another one back into your deck. And if you haven't drawn one already, you'll be able to set up something where you get 2 counter punches, or you get a Never Back Down and a Desperate Defense in your hand, and you could set up this 1-2 combo that Protection really struggles with because they have to hold on to those cards if they want to set up that combo otherwise. Well, here you can ditch that card as a resource, shuffle it back into your deck, and try to set up your combo that way. So it gets a little bit of an edge for me. Ultimately, I really like the design space of these cards. I just wish they were a little more efficient. I mean, even if these cost 0, they wouldn't be broken. You could just slap them on the table and get set up and ready to go. At a cost of 1, you're paying a tax on each of the cards that you're getting back, which feels really bad, especially since there's already a tax of flipping down to alter ego form. If these cards shuffled a card into your deck and then drew a card, they could cost 1 and they'd be amazing. They'd be included in so many decks. Every deck that is a flipping hero would include these cards. But as they are, it's a little bit difficult to get super good use out of them, which makes me a little bit sad. I think the Justice one has the most advantage because you're already flipping a lot with Justice with confusion and stuff like that. All right, so that is one set of 4 cards. Next, let's go ahead and talk about a set of trioed cards from the core set that we talked about in our first slide. So we have Surveillance Team, Tac Team, and Med Team. Surveillance Team costs 2, 3 effective resources once you count the card itself, and it's going to remove 3 threat. that is worse than for Justice. That is worse than just about the rate of every Justice event that exists in Justice. Why they would make something that spreads out the threat removal less efficient than the thing that just does it instantly, I don't understand. I guess there's an argument to be made of, well, maybe I'm going to play this in a hero that's going to sit in hero form, and this will just remove the auto threat. At the same time, it just isn't very good, in my opinion. Now, there is some future support for this card coming in the Miles Morales deck in Sinister Motives, and it is probably going to jump up to a pretty good use as soon as that stuff comes out, but I don't own that stuff right now. It's not in my card box. I haven't been able to play with it, so for now, can't use this card super well. All right, I'm going to throw Med Team up here in a pretty good use because I think a Med Team is very useful. It's very versatile, unlike Surveillance Team. One thing I didn't mention about Surveillance Team, the moment of despair for all Justice players is a Crisis icon because you can't get around the Crisis icon most of the time with your thwarting. Well, Crisis just prevents threat removal from the main scheme, so you can't even do it with Surveillance Team, which is a big penalty for Surveillance Team. All right, back to Med Team. Very versatile. So if you have an ally that has a 3-stat or even a 2-stat, you can use Med Team to heal 2 consequential damage from that ally, getting 4 damage out. So if you did that 3 times, you could get 12 damage for 4 effective costs. That's pretty good. Now you're going to have to take a long time because you have to heal that damage, and then the ally takes 2 turns to provide it back up. It can take forever. So it is very slow. But at the same time, you can also use this to heal your hero and stay in hero form. That shores up a weakness of protection because you don't want to have to flip down because you have such a deficit to make up with Justice. It's the most expensive of these core set supports, but definitely the most powerful and most used by players all over. Really good in multiplayer for helping other players have to not flip down. You can save the table a ton of threat and really give your Justice player some breathing room, which they might need if they're running Surveillance Team. All right, and TAC Team. I am going to put TAC Team in a pretty good use. I am a TAC Team fan, and some people might already know that. I think TAC Team is actually very versatile. It's reasonably efficient for an aspect card at its cost. You're paying 3 for effective resources to do 6 damage. That's a little bit more than Uppercut, which is a bad thing to compare to. But as a aspect card, it should be worse than hero cards like Heroic Strike that gets you the same thing for 6 and a stun. It's a little bit worse than I'd want it to be. If they could somehow make this deal 7 damage, like the first 2 did 2, the last one does 3, it'd be right in the sweet spot. You kind of want these delayed action cards to have this like added benefit. And the added benefit in this card, instead of being damage efficiency, is the ability to get around things. If you are stunned, and you need to flip down so that you can heal, but you can't get rid of a bunch of minions that are in your face, TAC Team can still damage those minions even when you're stunned, just like an ally can. They can also attack around guard, because it's an attack counter, but it's not an attack. It's a uses use, or it's an action ability. So you can put damage onto the villain and finish them off. Even if you're stunned, exhausted, and have 5 guards sitting in your face, you can get that last point of damage in. And it's great for burst and drip damage. I mean, if you are a very bursty character and you're running into a scenario that has a lot of toughness or a lot of guard minions, and you happen to draw into all your burst, and there's a stupid guard minion sitting in your face, nothing is worse than when you're playing Hawkeye and you draw into 3 skilled strikes, and you see that there's a stupid armored guard sitting in front of you. But if that armored guard was brought down to like 1 health or 2 health, you could TAC Team it, get it out of the way, and then still get your big combo through. And I love TAC Team for that reason. Super excited to see where this card goes. But yeah, big fan of TAC Team. Like the card. Excited to see if it gets future support as well. So let's go through here, and is there anything else that comes in sets? There it is. We have Enhanced Awareness, Enhanced Physique, and Enhanced Reflexes. These are 3 resource drip cards, and I call them that because they cost 3 effective resources. They get 3 counters on them, and in hero form, you can exhaust them to generate a resource of the type they provide. So Awareness provides mental resources, Physique provides physical, and Reflexes provides yellow energy resources. So what I like these cards for is you could use these for resource filtering. Let's say you're a character like Thor. Thor likes to have lots of lightning bolts in his deck because they really help him push his lightning strike to higher values, get around tough, hit a bunch of minions for AoE. Really, really good. But you might want to include other cards in your deck that don't have the lightning bolt resource. I mean, lightning strike's only 2 cards in your deck. You don't need to flood your deck with 30 lightning cards to make that work out. So what you can do is you can still include powerful physical and mental cards, and you can spend 3 resources on one turn to turn 3 cards that aren't energy resources into an energy resource using enhanced reflexes. So you can filter your deck and turn cards that are one resource type into another. The disadvantage is that they can only be used in hero form, and they're slowly dripped out over 3 turns. These cards aren't bad by any means. I think if more people play these cards, they would appreciate them a lot more. The problem is in the game when you're playing against a villain that's, I don't want to call them easy, but that's more standard or not overpowered like Thanos, or not Thanos, what am I thinking of? Ronin or Nebula. You don't really need to play these cards. Like, you have enough efficiency in your hero kit and the resource generators that are there that these cards don't provide a ton of value. And if you're playing against someone like Ronin or like Nebula, you don't have time to play these cards. So we really don't have the scenarios that offer these cards the advantage to be played. There are a lot of fun cutesy decks where you can set up super huge combos by having the right cards, but ultimately these cards are just kind of there. I think they're great for characters that need some cost curve smoothing. These can be great in Hulk, right? If you draw into a hand where it's just a dead hand and you can't get anything out of it, you can always throw down an enhanced physique and use that in a future round to help you play more cards later. They're great for characters that have like very specific cost restrictions. So I'm thinking of Captain America. I mean, he's already got physical resource generators built in, but if you can get one more, what does it hurt? One of the things I like to think about is how long is your game going to go when you're playing this card. If you draw this card early, and you can play it round 1, and for the next 3 rounds, you're going to have like an artificially increased hand size as far as spending power goes. Comparing that to Super Soldier Serum, that seems like a bad deal, right? Because Super Soldier Serum might stick to the board for 5 to 6 turns, but if playing this early allows you to play more things like Super Soldier Serum, it's probably worth it. At the same time, if you're like 1 turn from ending the game, this card's probably not worth playing because you're not even going to get the 3 effective resources out of it. Ultimately, it's just a neutral net resource, but it allows for that bursting and playing of more things that makes it a little bit more efficient. I'm going to go ahead here and put enhanced physique and enhanced awareness in the B tier, and reflexes in the B tier. There's a lot more heroes that care about physical and care about energy resources. There's a few that care about mental, and they don't care about mental in the way that enhanced awareness works super well for them yet. Justice players might like this enhanced awareness card, especially because a lot of their cards that require the mental resource don't come with it printed on them, so this is a good way to shore that up. But at the same time, I haven't had a big problem doing that. There are a couple niche cases where this works out pretty well, so I can't say can't use this well completely. It's kind of on the borderline here if we had another category. Iron Man can use this to go aerial 3 times, things like that. It can be like a cheapo replacement Quinn carrier for Iron Man, but you also don't want all those mental resources floating around in your deck, so you kind of want them to stick to the board and not disappear with uses. So I'm going to put this in can't use well. All right, moving right along here. We're going to put Hand Cannon way up here in a pretty good use. So Hand Cannon is a really cool card from Galaxy's Most Wanted. 2 cost, 3 effective resources for Hand Cannon. It has the Tech and Weapon trait, and restricted, you place 3 charge counters on it. When you make a basic attack, you can remove a charge counter to give your hero +2 attack and overkill. This is good just for the +2 attack, right? It's the equivalent of Tack Team for 1 cheaper. It just requires your hero to attack to be able to use it. The overkill is just a sweet added bonus. This works really well with Wasp, works really well with Rocket, works really well with Thor. Anyone that wants to overkill damage and use Moment of Triumph, this card really completes that sort of synergy. You can also use this with Mean Swing. Let's say maybe you don't need the overkill right now, so you have Mean Swing in your hand and you can exhaust this and keep it on the board a little bit longer to make those uses useful exactly when you need them. All right, let's keep going with these weapons. I'm going to put Sonic Rifle also up in a pretty good use tier. So Sonic Rifle has 3 uses, or 2 uses, 3 cost, 4 effective resources. You can use it to confuse an enemy. If the enemy is already confused, you can do damage. Never do that. It's almost never worth it to just deal the damage unless it's ending the game. Always save this and then just get another confuse out of it. Even if it means you have to flip down to burn that confuse so that you can play a second Sonic Rifle, it's worthwhile. The amount of threat this avoids well offsets the resource cost, and the fact that you can keep it around for exactly when you need it is really, really good. Great in solo for getting rid of a Phantom Advance. Lets you flip before you know where all the advances are in the deck. It's really, really good. All right, continuing on with weapons, I am going to put Plasma Pistol in can't use well. I don't think Plasma Pistol is unusable, and I forgot we had a bottom tier here, honestly, and I'm going to throw Assault Training down in the bottom tier. I think Assault Training is so bad in aggression that I would just tell you not to run it because it's not good. But Plasma Pistol, I used to put this in the don't use this tier, but people have convinced me that it can be run in Iron Man, just like Enhanced Awareness can. I'm not a big fan of it. 2 cost, 3 effective resources for a restricted card that has 3 uses that can ping for 1 damage 3 times. I guess it's okay for removing Tough, but it takes up one of your 2 restricted slots. It's a real odd cost of you're getting a Haymaker spread out over 3 turns. That sounds pretty horrible to me. People already don't like Haymaker. I don't know why they would like Plasma Pistol. It's really just there for its tech weapon traits. If you need a weapon for more mean swings or Fusillade, if that's a card you run, or if you need more tech items, then maybe this is worth playing. But overall, I don't use Plasma Pistol very well. I don't enjoy it. I haven't found deck slots that I feel like are sacrificial that I can throw Plasma Pistol into. All right, we're going on with Spider-Man. We have the Web Shooters. It is a 3 uses card, and with a hero resource, you can exhaust Web Shooters to generate a wild resource. So it's a 1 cost, 2 effective resources, turns into 3 resources. Resource advantage for Spider-Man. I like this card. It's not a bad card by any means. What I don't like is that almost every other hero in the game gets a resource generator that sticks forever, and Spider-Man's runs out. I mean, I get it, he's running on a web fluid, very thematic, very funny, haha. Very feel bad when the Captain America player sitting next to you plays 2 Super Soldier Serums turn 1, and you play 2 Web Shooters, and then just bemoan yourself knowing that they're going to disappear, and the other guy's isn't. So I am not a big fan of this card having uses. I wish it just costs, like, even if it costs 3 to generate a wild and stuck, I'd be a lot happier. Ultimately, it is a good card. It has the item and tech trait, so you can use Stark Tower to put this back into your deck, all sorts of crazy things in multiplayer, but still just not my favorite resource generator. I mean, if you're playing Spider-Man, you're definitely going to play this card, so I guess I should put it under a pretty good use. It's efficient. It definitely fits within Spider-Man. He has lots of costly cards, so he needs resource generators, but I just feel like it doesn't do anything special, and it kind of like, it does special things worse for the most part. But still a playable card, so it goes in the B tier. All right, next up we've got Night Nurse. I am putting Night Nurse in the a pretty good tier. She has 3 medical counters for 2 cost. When you remove a medical counter, you heal 1 from a friendly identity. I think it's identity. And remove a status card from that identity. So can't be used on allies, which is a bit of a bummer, like Med Team, but could remove a crucial stun or confuse. This is a double-edged sword. If you have Tough on as your only status card, you gotta remove it. So don't do that. That would be silly. But can be really, really clutch in multiplayer, especially if another player is getting stunned and you're healing them to keep them in hero form and removing their status conditions. People are going to love you as the protection player, as they should. All right, I've got 2 cards that I want to consider for the super usable tier, and they are Energy Barrier from Ms. Marvel's pack and Command Team from War Machine's pack. So Energy Barrier comes into play with 3 reflection counters. It has an interrupt when you would take any amount of damage. You reduce one of that damage by 1, basically, and reflect it back at any enemy. It doesn't have to be the enemy that's hitting you. This is really good mitigation. It really seals protection into that defend and take no damage region. You can imagine defend and take no damage is very risky. The villain's attacking you with 3 plus a boost card. You're defending for 5 and hoping that they only boost for 2. When they boost for 3, all your triggers don't go off. But if you have Energy Barrier there and it's sitting there for this exact use, you can still take no damage, trigger all your things, and do all the things that protection wants to do. It's also an item card and a tech card. Ultimately, it ends up being like a 6-point swing in damage. So you're preventing 3 and you're dealing 3. I think preventing 3 is worth a little bit more than dealing 3, in my opinion. But to be seen. I think it's pretty efficient. I think it's pretty useful, and it definitely does something unique in aggression in protection, that a few other cards are starting to do now, this like prick back sort of mentality. And it's super, super useful. So it could be our S tier super useful god card. But it's not, because that card is Command Team. Command Team is an enabler. So Command Team comes into play with 3 counters on it, uses, just like all these other cards. 2 cost, 3 effective resources. You exhaust this and remove a counter to ready an ally. Get Ready is one of the most explosive, strongest events in Marvel Champions, and it seems like the dinkiest little event that costs 0 and all it does is ready an ally. But it allows you to expend those allies faster so that you can set them up to chump block. Command Team is basically that, but you pay for it ahead of time. So instead of having to combo into your things, you get to spread these uses out exactly like a uses card should be. It should be a card that gains an advantage for being spread out instead of having to like combo and draw into it at the right time. As well, this came with a new archetype of cards that was all about pushing allies into play and discarding them at the end of the phase. So you want these in that type of deck so that you can get the most burst damage out of your allies. Works really well with cards like Goliath, works really well just to burn allies out of the way. Even with Nick Fury, this card is pretty clutch, turning every Nick Fury into a 4 thwart draw 3 cards, block and attack action, which is frankly pretty bonkers. Really like this card. I don't see any downsides to it. I guess it has a bigger upfront cost. I'm really happy that it costs 2. It gets me to slot Power of Leadership into a lot more leadership decks, because if you've got 2 command teams and maybe 2 lead by the fronts, or 3 command teams and 2 lead by the fronts and a bunch of allies, you have enough use cases for your Power of Leadership to really justify it. And ultimately, it's just a really, really, not even usable, but like amazing uses card. So I'm sorry, Energy Barrier, the last time I made one of these, you were up there at the top, but there's a new commander in town, and they are Command Team. So in the comments below, let me know what your favorite uses cards are, and if they're Fanaticism, I'm just going to thumbs down you. I swear to goodness. But yeah, let me know what your favorite uses cards are, what your favorite reason to delay using your uses counters right away. If you like watching these tier list videos or podcast episodes or gameplay videos, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, either the YouTube channel, the podcast feed, wherever. Leave a review. Really helps the channel out, helps me know what type of content people enjoy watching so that I can make things that you enjoy more. Thanks for tuning in, and have a very great and useful day.